Historic Sites project is on East 58th Street to visit the Modulightor building. We're here with the Paul Rudolph Heritage Foundation. Executive Director Kelvin Dickinson is going to be showing us through the building today. Kelvin, thank you for having us on this very loud street.
Yeah, I know, so we won't stay outside for too long, but thank you all for joining us. And I always love to talk about Paul Rudolph and his work, so this is very special, but I appreciate you guys coming to join us today. First, we always start with the outside of the building, because we're actually in a historic building. The Modulightor building is actually a light fixture company that was founded by Paul Rudolph in 1974. And in 1988, he discovered that he had to design a building for the lighting company because it was taking off in popularity. And what he did was use this as an example of a project that kind of explains his understanding of modern architecture. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the building design. Before I do that though, I'd like to talk about, I'm wearing a special mask made by Liz Wykes of Doko Momo, who's a big fan, and I love her, and she's great, and she made this specially for me today, and I just wanted to show it off. We're going to be starting to make some Paul Rudolph fabrics pretty soon, and so this is an example of what we're going to be doing with them. So anyway, I wanted to show it to you. So the building itself was originally done in 1988, and it was a 4-story building, and what you see today is an addition that was later built onto it. So the original, and I'll show you when we get upstairs, the building was 4 stories, and then about 10 years ago, we've added the upper 2 floors, and we're going to take you inside and show you all of them later on today. But I want you to get an understanding of, this is an example, a microcosm of Paul Rudolph's understanding of modern architecture. He believed that modernism had lost a sense of traditional scale and materiality, and so what he wanted to do with his building was show off. First of all, everyone thinks he does only work in concrete, which is not the case. He actually did work in steel, as evidenced here, and brick and other materials like any good architect does. But in this case, even though he's known primarily as a brutalist, this is all glass and steel. Now what he did was, he believes that architecture was missing a sense of classicism, a sense of scale, and a sense of order, and a sense of the neighborhood, and a sense of place. So what he does in this building is, he believes there's 3 types of scale in a building. The first type is when you're walking down the street, like we are right now, and you see it basically as a overall picture, and the lower part of the building is what the person experiences from the ground level. That is where most of the detail is, and in this case, he's using all kinds of references. The gate on the side of the building was actually modeled after a prison that he had seen, I believe it was in Europe, and he brought the idea and thought of it and included it in the building here. But the idea is that the first level of scale is what you see from the ground level. And so when you're walking down the street, it's a very detailed facade. Then the understanding is the second level of scale is when you're across the street like we are right now. And this is where you begin to see that he does a typical classical version of, there's a base of the building, there's a shaft, and there's a capital. The base is the foundation, then there's a repetition in the middle, which is the shaft, and then he gives you a top, which is very similar to some of the other buildings you see in the neighborhood, which are, back in the days of maybe the early 1900s or even Victorian, where you've got very classical, where you've got the cornice and you've got a repetitious middle, and then you've got a base. And then the final level of scale, Rudolph never gives you a building that is finished. He believes that modern architecture, the idea that what makes modern architecture modern is that it's always going to be changing. Technology changes, design changes, taste changes, etc. So in this case, he gives us a building where the top of the building embraces the sky and is unfinished. The idea is Rudolph always said, no one will ever write a poem or has ever written a poem to a building with a flat roof. So this building is his way of grasping at the sky, which implies that technology and modernism and modern architecture is always changing and unfinished. So in this one facade, we have this understanding of Rudolph, his ideas of modernism, his ideas of the materiality and scale. The building is made of 3 types of I-beams. The outside frame is 8 1/4. The horizontals are 6 1/4, and the verticals are 4 1/4. And the idea is that even though they're the same type, they're in a steel section, an I-beam, the different levels of scale add a complexity to the design, which makes him so unique compared to a lot of architects that just give you a flat facade and not a lot of detail. So anyway, let's go inside. See if we can cross the street here. That's a Paul Rudolph chair, which we started making. So if let me know if anyone's interested.
Thank you. So for folks who are joining us, if you've been to the Modulitor building before, let us know in the comments. Or if this is your first time experiencing the interior, let us know that too.
So here we are inside the Modulator Showroom. Hopefully everyone can hear me a little bit better. The Modulator Showroom, the name Modulator comes from the idea of the Modular, which is a Corbusian term. Rudolph was obsessed with modularity. He thought that if modern architecture embraced a simple component, a kit of parts, almost like Legos, you could then build buildings and designs that would be forever adaptable because they could be increased, they could be decreased, there could be additions added, as long as you understood the system. Mm-hmm. And so in this case, the modular lighting system actually began because he couldn't find light fixtures that matched what he wanted in his own projects. So what he's done is created a kit of parts. He started doodling and creating them in his when he was at his architectural office in the early 70s. And then he started making light fixtures for his own apartment. Later he made them for other clients and other projects. And then as people started saying, well, I'd like some of that, and he became more popular, it actually grew and outgrew his showroom, which was actually in his architectural office. The lighting company then moved down to Soho, and it was in Soho in the early 80s until this used to be known, and for those of you who lived in New York City for a long time, this neighborhood used to be the lighting district. It's not so much lighting district anymore. We're one of the last holdouts and just bulbs down the street. But this is the lighting showroom. It's for the lighting fixtures that Rudolph designed. He designed the system and he designed all these fixtures. The idea is that they can all be customized. So this is a kit of parts. This is an assembly that Rudolph designed, but he can change it in ways that make it unique for any given space, whether it be a big space, a small space, etc. What's unique about this is Rudolph designed everything. He designed the light fixtures. He designed how they were to be displayed. We've got drawings how he wanted the whole showroom laid out. He was the architect for the building. He even designed, and here's an example of the first, I believe this was when they did an exhibition at a lighting fair. This was a drawing he did of the lighting booth that was going to be used to show off the light fixtures. And so what's interesting about the light fixtures is, typical to Rudolph, he wanted them all handmade. They were all meant to be customized from a kit of parts so that they looked expensive, but yet they were still from a kit of parts. They're all made on site. So we actually are in a building that was originally a Swiss, I believe, furniture company that went out of business. And then they bought the building in 1988, tore down what was here, and Rudolph became his own designer / contractor and hired people off the street to create what's here now. And so this was primarily meant to be a building that was the lighting showroom. There's 2 sub-basements where all the light fixtures are made. There's a mezzanine, which has my office for the Paul Rudolph Heritage Foundation, but also where they make light fixtures. And then there is an apartment on floors 3 and 4. Now, the apartment is actually a pair of duplexes, and we're going to go up there and we'll show you that later. There's a front duplex that faces 58th Street, and there's a rear duplex that faces the rear setback on the back of the building. And those were primarily designed by Rudolph originally for his office when the building was under construction. He was here. But then later, when he needed some money to finish the building, because he was always running out of money because he kept making changes to it and he never knew when to stop designing. So what happened was he then moved his office to Beekman Place, and he wound up renting out those for extra income. Now, if there's any architects listening, this is the best thing you could do because we're always running out of money and we're always looking for some extra income. So he actually put some rental units in the building so that he could live off the income, and that actually helped offset when he was a little slow in his office. So these are all some examples. Now, and one other thing. So Rudolph was a big fan of collecting things. So these are some of the items that he would collect. And they're all unique in the sense that they're all handmade, or they look like they've been, worn or used for something. They're tools primarily, so they're actually a function, but they're used as art.
Rudolph in this building, you'll see, was very inspired by the Sir John Soane house in London. And we actually have a book where he went and underlined and circled things in a book about Sir John Soane. He had been to see the house. And so the whole experience here is very much what he tried to do at Yale, where found objects are put in interesting ways and displayed in multiples, like he did at Yale, like Sir John Soane did at the Sir John Soane house.
Spades, maybe?
Yes, they are actually. And these were to make shoes, I believe, Victorian shoes at some point. And those are hat molds over there.
Oh, over there there's some more.
And there's some more over there, yeah. And so what's interesting is we've got also a lot of original drawings. So for instance, this was an unbuilt stadium in Saudi Arabia that is on display here in the building. We use it because we want to show off Rudolph, but we also like to show off the lighting effects of the lighting. Modulator is very well known for making light fixtures that light up artwork. And so here's some more examples of original drawings that we have in our collection. This is a hotel that unfortunately did not get built in Jerusalem. The building that was built by a very famous Israeli architect, and it looks very similar. Unfortunately, Rudolph's work was not built. And then, so, the lighting showroom is pretty much where we have all different kinds of lights, but it's all a system that Rudolph designed. And some of these he actually designed the very first fixture, so this is one example that he designed himself. And Rudolph had some very interesting things that he liked to do. He would design light fixtures in patterns that he liked to use. And one of the patterns he did, and you'll see some examples of this in 3 dimensions upstairs, is he liked this idea of slipping spaces past one another and objects that slipped past each other in space. So this kind of like hashtag looking light fixture is an example of something he did that was exactly, and it's very similar to the floor plan at Yale, for instance. You can just leave those there, thank you. This is the lighting showroom. Typical Rudolph, a lot of stairs. So, Rudolph was big on stairs. And what we're going to do is we're going to take you upstairs. I think we'll go up the side stairs here, if that's okay, and I'll show you the second floor.
Let's do.
What's nice about this is we have a nonprofit that saves Rudolph's work. That's the Paul Rudolph Heritage Foundation. We have got an apartment that is an original Rudolph that we open up for, which we're going to show you, for tours and events and things like that. And then we've also got a lighting company that also builds light fixtures that were designed by Rudolph. So we're like one big happy family here. Everything's made on site, and we all work to preserve Rudolph's legacy, whether it be through making light fixtures or talking about him.
Making and restoring. You also, if someone has an original.
Absolutely. Actually, it's interesting because some of the light fixtures in Rudolph's original designs, like some of his homes from the 70s and 80s, I actually love it when people come in and say, I've got a Rudolph light fixture that might have made, you've got LEDs now, can I get it made with LEDs instead? We've got all the people here, all of the original equipment that was used to make those lights, and now they've got LED technology. And then I get a chance to talk to them about, hey, you've got a Rudolph house. Can I come take a look at it and take some photographs of it? And so that's one way we help preserve Rudolph's buildings by when we get to meet people here.
And someone is asking in the comments,
sure.
He would have designed these by hand, no computers.
No computers. No, actually Rudolph did not like computers. He would hire other architects to work with them, and they would do the drafting on the computer, and he would do everything by hand. So yeah, we don't have any evidence that he ever had a computer at all, actually. So anyway, this is the lighting company. We'll take you upstairs, and we'll talk about some of the other artwork when we get upstairs. And again, it's just like artwork everywhere on the walls. And so we've got an example of, we put like a little mini museum together, so when people are here, these are some examples. This is Rudolph here. These are some examples of some of the drawings he did. This was a drawing for this building, actually. This is what a section through the apartment upstairs. These would be working drawings. Rudolph would only do working drawings to get a building permit, which made it great for us when we show people the space, because it's kind of really complex. And Rudolph designed it all out of his head on paper and drawings like that. The hard part is there's no working drawings. We look at the floor plans, and all we see is an elevator and a fire stair and a big open floor plan. But these were what actually were used to get built at one point. So we have some examples, and we've been, trying to set up a little mini museum, like a house museum. That's what our goal is. So we've been doing some studying of 3D printing of unbuilt Rudolph projects. This is the Sino Tower in Hong Kong. This 3D print was a test that later wound up in a more formal model that was built that has just been shipped to Hong Kong to go to the M+ Museum. That exhibit's going to be opening up at the end of this year to talk about Rudolph's work in Asia. For those of you who don't know Rudolph that well, Rudolph was born in America as a son of a preacher, and then he traveled around but was obsessed with Frank Lloyd Wright. He went and saw the Rosenbaum residence and was amazed and wanted to become an architect after his father, who was a preacher, had commissioned a church to be built, and he watched them do the drawings for the church. So then he went to school, studied under Walter Gropius, and then went down to the Old Navy shipyards during World War II because he was born in 1918. He went and did not actually serve in World War II, but went to the Old Navy shipyards here in Brooklyn, where he mothballed ships after the war, and then wound up going down to Florida and being discovered in Florida doing the Sarasota School of Architecture with Ralph Twitchell. And the Sarasota School, kind of what made him famous, and he was most famous for his pen and ink renderings, because he would take these really big pen and ink renderings, knowing that, and this was smart at the time, architectural magazines would reduce them, and they almost looked like AutoCAD drawings because the hatching, and I'll show you some examples of original drawings upstairs, but the hatching technique was what made him famous. And then he became friends with Philip Johnson. There's a whole story behind that, and then he got discovered, and then eventually, at 40 years old, became the chairman of the architecture department at Yale and designed the Art and Architecture building. That exploded and made him world famous. And that actually is a whole, that we could have a whole talk about just that building. But anyway, so, this is kind of the headquarters of the Paul Rudolph Heritage Foundation, where we get to talk about his legacy and why it's important to preserve it, and just the sheer amount of things that he could do and did do. So these are kind of examples. We have a collection of his glasses, his round glasses, which are typical architect's glasses. Corbusier, Philip Johnson, all of them, including Rudolph, had them. So these are our offices where we've got Joe working with us. Joe is putting some work up on our website. If you haven't been to our website, please check it out. Joe just finished he's finishing right now, putting up a map showing the 320 or 30 projects worldwide that we know of that Rudolph designed, of which this is one of them. And he's right now making the project atlas on our website. We've got photographs and drawings of most every Rudolph project up on our website. We're also planning on eventually opening up a study center here, like an architectural study center on modern architecture. This was something Rudolph had wanted to do at Beekman Place when he lived in Beekman Place. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, so we're intending to do it here. Ultimately, this building will become the foundation's building, and we will open up a study center. We're starting to create a reading library of modern architecture, and that is the goal, is to eventually have preservation groups focus on modern architecture here as well. And then we've got my office, which is in the process of collecting. We have items we sell here, like books for sale and things like that, to raise money. And so this is all kind of the offices. You get a little behind the scenes, which we don't normally show people. But yeah, so we're busy working away. And did we show you guys the
Oh, we
lights?
didn't.
Oh no, let's go take a look.
Sorry, elevator, we'll be back for you.
So this is Jose. He's making light fixtures. So as we were saying, all the light fixtures are actually made in the building by hand by this guy right here. And they're all a kit of parts, and so each one is made by hand, custom. What we do is we work with lighting designers. So we don't sell to we sell to the trade only. When I say we, I mean the Modulightor company. And so if lighting designers are watching, feel free to call. They work with anybody. They've put light fixtures all over the place. There's some going up at Yale right now. I'm not sure if those are any of these, but it's something that they do, and they do work with lighting designers. And it's all made right here, so you can see it. Talk to us about Rudolph and see lights being made that were designed by Rudolph all at the same time.
Cool.
Very cool.
Hi.
So we'll go upstairs, and I will show you some materials that we've got in our archives.
I don't know. Hopefully the elevator should be fine with our reception, but if you
Okay.
lose us people, just hang tight. I think we'll be okay though.
We'll show you the, what Rudolph space doesn't have art in it, and that includes art in the elevator. So Rudolph collected art objects in multiples, and this is an example of bicycles. So he would find, for instance, bicycles by all of them made by the same guy, and then display them in multiples. And what's really cool about it is again, it's like modular. Each bicycle is a bicycle. It's made by hand. It's using the same material, but the way it's made, every bicycle is slightly different from the other one. So he displays them in the elevator, just like this, in rows, so that they look similar but different is the idea. And then this is, oops. So this is our 2 floors that we've added in the last 10 years. Now, at the very end, we're going to show you the Paul Rudolph original apartment downstairs. But these 2 floors were added within the last 10 years. They just opened in time for us to have our birthday centennial for Paul Rudolph in 2018. But this space we use for events. So we have lectures here, we have a TV, we have speakers. We have an open house that happens on the first Friday of every month, which when COVID gets a little bit better, we'll start up again. These 2 floors were used primarily now for event space, so we do rent them out. This was all originally done by Mark Squayo, who was the job captain and project manager for Mr. Rudolph during the original building construction. I'll show you a drawing upstairs. We've got some drawings on display, which kind of explains the building and how the addition was done. Rudolph left us a good elevation facade to work with. We knew that he wanted to add 2 floors because he originally planned on this being a 9-story building. Unfortunately, between running out of money and the fact that the zoning changed, he could not build the 9 floors. So we had a lot of sketches of what he wanted to do, and then we had a good rendering of the front facade. Mark Squayo came back and then worked with Ernst Wagner, who owns the building, who co-founded Modulightor with Mr. Rudolph, and lives on the 3rd floor, to design these 2 floors. We were going to make them apartments, but then we figured that it would be more interesting if we could use this as a function space for the foundation.
And we're going to see a lot of plants. You were telling me a little bit about his, the idea of kind of the ruin. Right?
Yes. So even pictures of Rudolph's spaces, he would always build in these like plant boxes. And the idea was that his buildings would make beautiful ruins, right? So that these plants would just overgrow, and the idea of the juxtaposition between the modern architecture and these lush plants is really fascinating. I don't know if there's a term for it. I think it was, there's a term of brutalism when it's kind of overgrown with plants, and my mind blanks right now, but there is, a group of brutalism that does have that characteristic. Rudolph had plants overgrowing everywhere, in his apartment, in various other projects that he designed. He was also a big fan of these chairs here, so they're always seen in Rudolph's apartment. These were reupholstered as white. Now, we do have some examples of furniture that Rudolph designed. That chair that we showed you in the front window was designed using a system called Abstracta, which Rudolph, again, liked because it was a modular system, and he was able to, it was a kit of parts. It was primarily made to do display windows for retail stores. But for Rudolph, he would turn it into for his own purpose, furniture for his apartment. Rudolph also made anything with it. He would make high chairs for kids. He would make tables. Here's an example of the modular components of the Abstracta being used to create a table. What we did discover, though, was Abstracta, because it wasn't meant for seating and it was held together by gravity, was not very good to make furniture out of. So what we've done is, over the past couple of years, the owner of Modulightor, Ernst Wagner, basically redesigned it from scratch. We have the same now stainless steel tubing, slightly thicker so that it doesn't warp. All of the components, the corner components, have been custom made so that they don't pull apart any longer, that they're all actually fit together and they don't come apart over time. And we started making them for sale. So all of the tables and the chairs that Rudolph originally made that you see in auction houses and in museums, we actually are now able to make in a system that lasts longer and will not fall apart.
Yeah.
Because it's stainless steel, it doesn't pit. The original was chrome plated, and so the original seating didn't last as long. But now we've got the system in place to be able to make these again.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So I'll show you another example. So we've got, Rudolph was a big fan of traditional architecture, including Louis Sullivan. So we've got a Sullivan panel down at the end here, which is a mold that was made. The original's downstairs, and I'll show it to you. But this was an example of one that he took from Yale, and then eventually went ahead and put it in his apartment at Beekman Place. So this was the way it was originally displayed. There's a photograph of the Beekman Place. I don't know if you can see that very well, but it was originally, the original's downstairs. This is a copy up here of the panel. And Rudolph liked the idea of this was artistic, sculptural, but yet it was not like an applied finish. It was not like painted or something like that. He did very much like Frank Lloyd Wright, built-in furniture. The art had to be kind of like incorporated into it. He had a way of thinking about art. And sculpture was like objects that were found objects. These are drawings of the model that we showed you downstairs of the Sino Tower. These are reproductions. This drawing of the tower is actually 8 foot tall in reality. So this is a reproduction. Not a very good reproduction, but when you look at it up close, considering it's half the scale it would have been. Had this project been built, it would have been as tall as the Empire State Building in Hong Kong. Sadly, it didn't get built. It was a competition. He won the competition, but unfortunately, the client did not proceed with building it. But this would have been amazing. I mean, imagine that as a person, and you're talking about, again, this is an example of his 3 levels of scale. There's a person, and then you've got this amazing legs, almost like the Eiffel Tower that project up. And then his idea of 3 levels of scale, where you get the pedestrian scale, you get the second level, which is the base, the repetitive shaft, and the capital, and then you get the final scale, which is as if you were driving down a highway and you were to see the top of the building in a split second. Those are the mechanical units at the top of the building that were intended to be gold-leafed, so that when the sun hit them, you got this amazing reflection off of the top of the building that you could see from miles away as you were driving down the highway. So that was the 3rd level of scale. And it's an example of how Rudolph tried to humanize and put scale back into modern architecture. So now we'll take you upstairs and show you some drawings.
Stairs on stairs on stairs.
Yes, you can't have Rudolph without having stairs. Although we have handrails on these stairs, so you'll be safe. Great.
Oh gosh.
You made it. So this is an example of the front facade of this building. This was Rudolph's original rendering. When he did renderings, he didn't do renderings to design projects very much. It was to sell the design once he'd already designed it. Anything else was done pretty much like colored pencil on trace paper. But when it got to this level, he was pretty much done designing and he wanted to show it off at that point. So in this case, again, the base of the building with the 3 layers of scale, the base, the repetitive shaft, and then the top. Now you'll notice that this looks a little different than what we saw outside. And the reason for that is Rudolph started construction, and then ran out of money when he got to here, and then stopped, and had intended to do the original top of the building. But he ran out of money. He hired people off the street to do construction so that he basically did it all himself, so that if he ran out of money, he would just stop construction. So we always knew that he wanted to build a much taller building, and the idea was that these would become apartments. So this is the ground floor, the mezzanine, 3rd floor apartment of the duplex, 4th floor of the duplex, living room, bedroom, and then it would be repeated above, and then there would be a top part. Now, in some of the cases, we know that Rudolph had intended to put his architectural office, which by this time was at Beekman Place, back on top of this building. but that did not happen. Rudolph passed away in 97, and this building had run out of money and stopped here at that point. So we've simply added these 2 floors. Now, Rudolph did not give us drawings about what the back of the building looked like. He gave us the front, but not the back. So in the back of the building, we actually added balconies, which is nice because when we have events here, we've got people that can go outside on the balconies. So each floor that we've added, the roof, the 6th and 5th floors all have balconies on the back, which are in the same style of the metal and the glass and the concrete infill panels. Now, I will show you some models because one of the things that I love, having been an architect, but now I'm running the foundation, but when I was an architect, one of my favorite things was models. And so what we've done is we've taken Rudolph projects and we've built models, because I think that sometimes people can look at drawings and say, I get it, but then there's a lot of people that look at models and say, now I understand. And so this is an example of a model of Rudolph's original apartment when he was chairman of the architecture program at Yale. And this is an interesting model because we had floor plans and we knew a little bit about it, but the photographs were all black and white. And we built this model so that we could show it off for the centennial of Paul Rudolph's birth. We had a big setup here of all these drawings and opened it to the public, and it was in the New York Times, etc. And there was this one guy that came up and was looking at the model, and he's shaking his head, and I thought, I love it when I see people do that, because I'm like, why? What does he see that I haven't seen, right? And he's looking at it, and he goes, this isn't right. And I said, well, wait a moment. I showed him the black and white photograph, and he looks at this and he goes, but those were brown. That's brown leather, not black leather. And I said, how did you know? And he goes, I used to live in this. When Rudolph moved out, I moved in, and I know that those couches were brown leather and not black because they were still there when I moved in.
So will you be changing it?
So I will have to repaint the model, but that's a great story. I love it when people come in that knew Rudolph, and I just sit them down and I go, tell me everything. I want to know everything. Here's an example of Paul Rudolph's 23 Beekman Place. Now, I know that those of you who have been to the website before we did the event today, there's a listing for 23 Beekman Place. We did our model of 23 Beekman off of what was the best Rudolph drawings that we had, which were the famous cross-section, which I believe is on your website, which shows Rudolph's, again, the final product. This building was also always under construction. And so we don't really know where Rudolph stopped. What's interesting, though, is we do know that he had the piano, and we've got the same piano downstairs. The piano shows up here. It shows up here in this project, right there. And you'll later see it downstairs. Because this was something, Rudolph was a classically trained pianist. And he actually paid through going to when he was in college in the early years, by playing the piano. And he bought a concert grand piano from the earnings from his first major project, which was the Mary Jewett Arts Center. And so the piano was his prized possession, and he took it everywhere. And he would crane it up into the windows through Beekman Place. He took it from this project. And there's all these interesting things, but Beekman Place is well known for having a glass bottom bathtub in his bedroom, right? A little crazy. And I believe that is essentially what we've tried to show right here in this space. The model is not as detailed as Rudolph's original design was. The poor model makers just couldn't figure out how it was supposed to be put together. They did a great job, though. Now, some examples of Rudolph's work in Asia, for instance, is the Lippo Center, which is also known as the Bond Center. This is in Hong Kong. It was built in the early 80s. I think it was completed around 1984, thereabouts. It is an office building. And what's interesting about it is, again, the 3 layers of scale. You've got the base with these giant, almost like pistons that push the building up out of the ground. And then you've got this very repetitive middle part of the building, which gets its nickname. They call it the Koala Building because it looks like koalas climbing up a stalk of bamboo. And then at the top, the 2 towers aren't exactly the same height, and they twist a little bit at the top so they don't face the same direction. And so what's interesting is again, nothing's a mirror, because Rudolph thought that symmetry, even though it's a very classical concept, was too frightening. And he was very much like Frank Lloyd Wright in that sense. Frank Lloyd Wright, if you look at the Guggenheim, takes the entry and kind of pulls it off to the side a little bit. And Rudolph would do the same thing. He thought symmetry was meant for churches. You know, he goes, because he obviously grew up the son of a preacher, he thought that it was frightening to walk down the aisle of a church because that was too serious. So he always did things with a little bit off, a little bit off to the side. So now here's an example of the drawing that Rudolph would do for that project. And this is a full-scale copy of the drawing. Again, you see that it's all done by hand using a rapidograph, pen and ink. But when this gets reduced for magazines and publications, it almost looks like AutoCAD. But it's all done by hand, and I can't imagine how long it took the guys to draw this by hand. But you can see that he's got all these plants built in, overhanging, and meant to cascade down the front of the building. And all of that was done intentionally. So he brought landscaping into the building and in and through it.
Did he work with this specific landscape architect or firm? Did he specify what plants he thought would be best?
That's a good question. He did not specify plants to the best of my knowledge. He did work with some rather well-known landscapers whose name, Zevi, can't remember the guy's name, who did some work with him on some projects, including a project in Long Island, which was they did a rooftop, and it was very interesting because they planted it all with these kind of curvy 60s looking designs, and it was something that he wanted the rooftop to become a garden so that when you walked out onto it, it actually was a functioning, almost like a green roof, a little bit ahead of his time, but he did work with landscape architects for that. And he was familiar with some of the well-known landscape architects from the 50s and 60s. So this is an example of the drawings that he would produce to create what actually got built in Hong Kong. Now, some examples, we've got a lot of work in our archives. These are examples of the floor plans that he did of his own apartment at Beekman Place. Hopefully you can see them. They're fine plastic, so they're a little shiny. But these are the floor plans that we gave the model makers to use when they created the model.
Oh, cool.
And so that's
Can
an
you point
example.
out the bathtub you're talking
Oh,
about?
sure. Let me see. Where is it? It's right here. There it is. There's Rudolph's bed. And he had a little elevator in there, which was actually a dumbwaiter. And it's so sad because that elevator he put in because he wanted to, there's no elevator in his whole quadruplex, 4 different levels.
Wow.
So he put this little dumbwaiter in, and it was all enclosed in plexiglass, and it was this like cube of light that went straight down through it. But that was the first thing they had to get rid of because Rudolph put it in without a building permit.
Oh.
And it was very dangerous. Everything about Rudolph's architecture sometimes can be a little dangerous. There were whole parts of the floors here, like this part here, which is plexiglass so that you could look down multiple floors into the floor below. But the glass bottom bathtub was there, and then it overhung the kitchen. And so here, this is the kitchen. You can kind of see the X over it. That is the bathtub, which is clear plexiglass above. So when someone's taking a bath, you can be in the guest room and look up, or you can be in the kitchen and look up and see somebody taking a bath.
What a treat.
Yeah, exactly, depending on who's taking a bath. So what's interesting is we've got so many different materials. A lot of his work, this is a photograph of when he was in the Navy, down at the old Navy shipyards here in Brooklyn. They tried to get him to go to, we got letters in our archives, they tried to get him to go to the Korean War, but he was able to get out of it because he was so busy as an architect down in Florida at the time, so he was able to not have to go to be in the Korean War. But that's a photograph that was taken when he was down in the Brooklyn shipyards here. We've got some of his note cards when he was in school at Alabama Polytechnic, later to become Auburn University. This was when he was in the Navy Reserve here in New York, and then when he was a professor at Yale.
Cool.
And we do have a lot of original material too. So this is an original section through the Dean residence, which is in Great Neck out in Long Island. And this is all done by hand. This was all, again, no computers. And what's interesting is this was on the wall during our exhibit. And again, a woman's there. She comes with her family. She's staring right up against it. And I was looking at her and I thought, again, what is she looking at? And she's looking at this. She goes, yep, yep, yep. So I said, okay, I've got to know who you are. And she goes, well, that's my house. And I was like, really? Tell me all about it. I want to hear more. So she says that the house is exactly as it's drawn here. The bar is where it is, the stairs cascade down where they are, and the house is beautiful. And she said that she had lived next door to the house, and she knew that there was this crazy house being built next door. And when it was being put up for sale, she said she went and sat in the audience, and she got so excited she accidentally raised her hand and bought the house when she didn't intend to. She lived next door. And her husband came home and said, you know, what have you done? And she goes, well, we're going to have to pack up because we're moving next door into this crazy house next door. And that was the Dean residence.
Wow.
And that's the story I got to hear because she actually came, saw the drawing, and wanted to tell me about it. So again, very cool. I love it when people come and talk about Rudolph with me. These are some examples of, again, a drawing that he would do. This was all done by hand, of a skyscraper that actually got built. This is the Concourse, but it looks very different. There's 3 versions of this. This was the later version. This drawing probably would have been about 4 feet or 5 feet by 3 feet. And what Rudolph would do is he would have people in his studio, one in each corner, working, some upside down, some right side up, and then they would all he would set it up in the beginning with the perspective. Mm-hmm. He would lay it out, people would work on the drawings, and then he would come in and add people and trees. And so sometimes other people would put in the people and trees, and we can tell because he had a very stylistic way of adding people to his renderings. And so in this case, the people are all done by him. But it was interesting because you get a sense of the fact that he would have people work all night on these renderings and then come back in, and he would always add the finishing touches. Very cool. This project was picked apart during the Charleston. There was a book about the Charleston, I want to say the Charleston tapes. Anyway, this was the project that Philip Johnson tore him apart on. It was interesting, he and Philip Johnson were very close. And Philip Johnson would always accuse Rudolph of, you keep designing the same building over and over and over again as if you're going to, get it right finally. And his response to Johnson was, you don't know how to design the same building ever again. You keep changing styles and your designs keep changing. And that was his kind of throwback on Johnson when Johnson said that. They were close, but not, they knew each other, and they would have lunch together actually every Friday. I understand Rudolph's office was across the street from where he and Johnson would have lunch on Fridays. But they did critique each other's work a lot. When Johnson did the AT&T building, Rudolph didn't have very many nice things to say about it, for instance, but they would always kind of rip on each other. This is a rendering, again, a reproduction of the cafeteria of the borough's Welcome Building. Now, sadly, we've tried to save this building, but it's currently being demolished in North Carolina. It's the only Paul Rudolph project in North Carolina, and it is going to finish demolition probably by the end of this month, sadly. But this was a rendering that Rudolph did of the cafeteria. That was an addition later. He came back and did 3 additions to the project.
Time is flying, Kelvin. Just a 15-minute warning.
Okay. So really quickly, because we'll go downstairs, I just want to say we do have some things we sell on our website if anyone ever wants to go and see. We've got some books that we published ourselves about Rudolph. We also offer for sale Paul Rudolph the Late Work, which is a book that talks about Rudolph's work in Asia and other places. And then we also have people that give lectures here about modern architecture. And we've had Carolyn Robb-Zaleski, this is her book about Long Island modernism. And we've had Beatrice Colomina come and speak about X-ray architecture in hospitals and modernism. And then we've got Paul Rudolph Inspiration and Process in Architecture, which is about Paul Rudolph's drawings. And those are all available for sale on our website.
Before I go away from these plans, a question just has come in regarding the glass bottom tub, because of course.
Yes.
Do you know what the motivation was behind that?
So, it was, Rudolph liked this idea of transparency, the idea of privacy and not being private. I mean, this was his own apartment. He would set up views where he would actually sit there and go, I want to see straight this way, and he would line up views with windows and walls up or down. The idea that you would be a little bit frightened, you would turn a little bit and see another view, and then you turn again like we did on the stairs coming up. Mm-hmm. The idea that he set up these vantage viewpoints where you could spy on people without being seen yourself, kind of like. Also, there was a little bit of naughtiness to the idea of having a plexiglass bathtub hanging above the kitchen in the guest bedroom, I would imagine. And so that was something that he also was well known for exploring. Sometimes got him into trouble. Sometimes he would put something in a client's house if the client would come back from being away, like Alexander Hirsch did, where he did a mural on the side of the wall of, guys in bikinis, and they were all kind of like, running around, and Alexander Hirsch goes, "What are you doing?" And this giant mural that Rudolph had done himself and inscribed in the plaster. So, there was a little bit of naughtiness there that Rudolph would do, but it was always for himself or his private clients. But that was probably why, the plexiglass bathtub. Sadly, Rudolph said he only used it once because it leaked horribly. So, it is what it is. Here's an example before we go downstairs. We have all of Rudolph's original clothing. Now, what's funny is considering the guy is known for doing nothing but thinking about architecture and hand drafting, and that was it, he had everything made custom for him. So he did do some things that he would spend a little bit of time and energy on. I just love the fact that he was well known for his knit ties, and that the suits are very tactile, so that, something that he was, again, his architecture very rough like Yale, and then he's got these, herringbone, really rough wool suits. But it was all made by hand. And we love the fact we haven't dry cleaned it, but there's ink stains where the pens would always get ink. Ooh. Yeah, so. And then we'll go downstairs and look at the apartment. Oh, yes. Stay here, Alvera. I totally forgot.
What's that? Oh.
We've got all kinds of fun stuff here, but since we're running out of time, little 3D models that we've been printing of some unbuilt Rudolph work. When I get free time, but we've been working with model makers to. If anyone wants to volunteer, let me know. We like to do this. I've got a ton of stuff that we could do that with.
Bicycles again?
Bicycles again, yes. All done by the same guy. Apparently when they were bought, the guy said, "That's it, I'm done, I have no more," and he went home, and that was it. He had sold all the bikes he had made. But Rudolph would do the same with little plastic robots that he would paint on the weekends. We've got them in the apartment I'm going to show you now. So this is the apartment that Rudolph designed.
Should I go left or right?
Either one, however you want. Yeah, let's start here, that's good. There is the piano that we were looking at earlier. So, again, this was a piano that we brought over from Beekman Place. So this is, and you can kind of show them all around, this is an example of what Rudolph would design as a rental property.
Wow.
It doesn't look like a rental property, but I can tell you what's interesting about it is he's done a lot of things in here to make this space unique. It's a row house. It's only 18 feet inside to inside and 20 foot outside to outside lot line. And he's done all these tricks to make the space feel bigger. First off, there's things in here, everything's white, so that makes the space look bigger. All the lighting, most of the lighting is all indirect lighting, so everything kind of glows. Rudolph was a big fan of indirect lighting. He thought it humanized a space because the light would reflect the surface of the walls back at you, and so he felt like indirect lighting was one of the best types of lighting. Nothing in here gives you a sense of scale, right? Maybe the piano, but that's it. That was intentional. The space feels bigger because the space, you have no way of looking at something and going, oh, there's a molding, there's a crown molding, there's a, something like that. So everything is meant to look like the space is bigger than it really is. Then the other thing is Rudolph does these perceptual tricks. The space is moving, but yet stands still at the same time. And he did very careful studies with people, contractors, that he would hire to come in and do the work to get it so that it would lay out just right. And he does some tricks, again, that make you feel like the space is bigger. So this is a bathroom here. But what he's done to make the bathroom feel bigger is the walls don't go all the way to the ceiling. So again, no privacy in the bathroom. But what's interesting is your mind looks at that and sees what is a very small space beyond, but because it's in shadow and this doesn't go all the way to the ceiling, the space appears to be much wider than it really is. And that was a trick that he employed here. Now, again, this is a rental apartment made to make some extra income for Rudolph at the time. So what he did was, the design is what looks expensive, but all the materials here are very inexpensive. He's using 3/4 inch plywood. Everything is with white paint, and he's using some floor tile, marble floor tile, but this was, relatively, it's all very similar, easily maintained, and off the shelf. And so there were no working drawings for this. So one of the things I'm doing, or I have just finished doing, because we're in the process of preparing a landmark application, is I had to go in and spend 2 weeks per floor surveying with a laser, everything, because we had no working drawings. And now I'm proud to say we've got floor plans to a fraction of an inch over 100 foot, so in length. So this is one side. Now again, these are 2 twin duplexes. So this is a duplex, and you can show them the upstairs. So all of this is, again, a whirling space. It's kind of like it circles around you and goes up like a big tornado. And that was a way of making you feel like things are happening, it's moving. It's not all small little dead space, like all of us live in these apartments where, they're not as interesting as this one, where it's just a box. Rudolph doesn't give you a box. He gives you this kind of movement that kind of twirls around. There's a lot of things here that are from Rudolph's own apartment. This was over his fireplace at Beekman Place. And again, this is his idea of artwork, where artwork is found objects, and then he gathers them in groups, and the space, almost like Morse code, is meant to show off his understanding of architecture and his understanding of scale and material and space and repetition. All the books are his. Then we've combined the 2 apartments into one, but this would have been the front door to this unit. This would have been the public hall. But in this case, it's been opened up when Ernst Wagner moved in 2001. He combined the 2 apartments. And then this is the back apartment. So this would have been the other apartment. You're standing where you would have been the front door. And then you come in, and this would have been the living room for the rear duplex. And here, we've got a roof garden at the rear setback. And then this is the original that was at Yale. This was something that Rudolph was given. He was told by the people at Yale when he left in 1965, what do you want to take with you? And he said, I'd like to take the artwork, the Louis Sullivan tile, so he did. And then he said, I want to take this painting I found in the basement, which was this painting that was going to be thrown away. And it turned out that the painting was done by a very famous artist, although at the time he was a student at Yale. And it turns out to be a painting by, oh my gosh, I always forget his name. He's now a very famous sculptor.
It'll come to us.
It'll come to us. Anyway, people come to see it because I didn't know what it was at first, but it turns out to be Richard Serra.
There.
That's who it is. It's a painting by Richard Serra that apparently when he left Yale, he burned all of his paintings and intended to go into sculpture. And when Rudolph left Yale, he fished it out of the garbage and said, I like it. And it's here in the apartment, and Richard Serra has actually acknowledged that it was his and wanted to know, how did we wind up with it? Because he thought he burned them all. We've got artwork, again, on the walls that are Rudolph drawings. These are copies of some of the originals. You can see these are all done by hand, and they're examples. Some of them are built, and some of them are not built, but they're all examples of the hand drafting and the work that he would do. This was in Hong Kong. This was built in Singapore. That was the top of Sino Tower. That's the drawing that was for this space.
And you were telling me before, the color indicates levels or layers, right?
So Rudolph thought in 3 dimensions, but he was so fast, and he didn't want to waste time explaining himself to people in his office. So he would take a colored pencil, and different planes would be different colors. And if you worked in his office, you knew that this color, magenta and orange and yellow and blue was for glass, but the other colors were different planes in space. So he would give you a floor plan, give you a section, and then you would understand the color system so that you could then recreate it in construction drawings. He would essentially let you figure that out. And so these are examples of some of the drawings that he did. Now here's an interesting story. I don't know how much more time we've got.
About 5 minutes.
Okay. Here's an example of an interesting sculpture. I never knew what this was. I knew it looked like a Picasso. Ernst told me it was Picasso, and I said, I don't know what. Okay, fine. I don't know what it is. It's a wood maquette. model that was produced by Picasso for a project that we later discovered would have been a 100-foot tall concrete sculpture that was supposed to be built in Europe, but didn't get built. And Picasso, when the Europeans didn't want it, took the model, put it on the shelf in his studio, and said, fine, you guys don't want it. Around the 50s, University of Florida was doing an art gallery building and said to Picasso, we would like to build your sculpture on our campus. So Picasso said, okay. So he built 3 wood models of his original metal model. One he gave to Paul Rudolph, the other he gave to the university, and the third one is still sitting in his studio. We didn't make that connection until we happened upon a newspaper article by somebody in Florida who had an exact same copy of this. And I said, now there's 2 of them. How many more are there? We had no idea. So anyway, we found out that the rest of the story and how we were able to acquire this was through piecing the story together through the newspaper.
Very cool. Sarah, Picasso.
Yeah. We've got some other things here. We've got, let's see, right behind you, a hand. This was given to Rudolph by Corbusier. Rudolph visited Corbusier in his studio. Corbusier gave him the hand. Ernst likes to tell me that Corbusier's wife gave him an apple and said, you're on your way, and sent him back to America. But this was from Corbusier, a gift to Rudolph.
And maybe last kind of fun, playful thing that we can end on, because I want to leave you time to
Sure.
let folks know any upcoming initiatives or projects you've got going on. But I remember when you told me about the kind of playful approach you took to these.
Oh,
This
yes.
little family of stamp rabbits.
Yes. So these are actually stamps for documents. And these are, interestingly enough, they all look very similar. This is the mama rabbit and the baby rabbits.
Yep.
And so this is, again, he would, between Ernst and Rudolph, they would just find objects, display them, and there was always a reasoning behind it, but they were found objects primarily. And so we've got what we call the collections here, which is the collection of objects they collected together, and we've got a lot more elsewhere in the building, but these are some that have been on display here. But yeah.
Thank you so much for this. It's incredible to have the opportunity to come and walk through, and we're really grateful to be able to share that with everyone watching today. So
Great.
let's shout
Any
out your
questions?
website and your
Oh, sure.
and the mass. Let's just
Oh, yes.
make sure everyone knows where to go.
Very cool. So we are at www.paul, it's very long, Paul Rudolph Heritage Foundation.org. You can also follow us on Facebook. Look us up. We're the Paul Rudolph Heritage Foundation on Facebook. We have a Twitter account, Paul Rudolph HF on Twitter, and we are known as the Paul Rudolph Foundation because the name was too long, it couldn't fit, on Instagram. So follow us on Instagram. We do post Paul Rudolph floor plans and drawings, and we've got thousands. I think our archives are now somewhere north of 9,300
Wow.
drawings and photographs. And then when we eventually come back with COVID, we're going to open up for our first Friday, and we have wine and cheese and things here, and we talk about Rudolph on the first Friday of every month. So follow us on our website, follow us on our mailing list, and hopefully we get a chance to see all of you here when things get a little bit better with COVID.
Thank you again so much. All right, everyone, enjoy the rest of your day. Happy Friday.